I'm going to go ahead and cheat a few minutes so I can get a couple more minutes of class time. Before we begin, my wife doesn't have to remind me, Brother Don, you want to lead us in a class prayer? Thank you. Amen. If you weren't here on Sunday morning, we went over kind of the folder, and I'm going to just do that real quick for those who weren't here. Should have a folder for the class, and in the left-hand pocket should be a prophet timeline, and it's color-coded. Upper right-hand corner gives you pretty much the prophet and which nation he was prophesying for. Right-hand pocket is basically a map of the divided kingdom at that time. Attached to the left pocket, minor prophets list with the dates, so all the minor prophets with the most, consistent date they were prophesying. The graphic organizer has a lesson heading. When we get into the prophets, you'll just put whatever prophet we're talking about. For right now, it's like introduction. The time period that we're talking about, the king or kings that might be involved in that particular prophet, and any verses of interest that you find that you want maybe to remember. Jots is to put down any answers to questions in the class. You can use the back of that graphic organizer as well for answers. Sketch, remember, I'd like for you guys to make some kind of sketch during the class just to help you retain information. Tidbits might be something you might want to follow up with later. That's that section, and then miscellaneous, it's up to you. A map, whenever we're talking about different places, if you would just jot down that place with the little dot, kind of again reinforce learning that particular place. Takeaway, kind of important for me is that you guys get a takeaway for each class. So whatever the biggest takeaway or takeaways that you got out of the class, you can put in that area. Also, following each graphic organizer is a sheet of notebook paper. So if you want to take any notes during class, that's provided. And also a Post-it should be attached to each graphic organizer. And you'll notice there's just 4 graphic organizers for each class. So we only have 2 weeks, and that's it. So then we go into, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. After 2 weeks, I'll bring in more graphic organizers, and then we'll have a class opening up the folders, and you guys can include more graphic organizers and notebook paper. Going back to the Post-it, I loved your all's feedback. I took that to heart, so I appreciate it. Again, after each class, we're going to put a Post-it back there, probably where Thomas is sitting. And it could be a big idea again, teacher feedback, observation. Or I got this question from someone in class. I'm not sure who it was, but it'd be really cool if you want to include a review question from that previous class. So, for instance, we talked about which land was called a land flowing with milk and honey. And so, does anybody remember what that might be? It would be Canaan, right? And so, does anybody want to volunteer who? Roger, thank you. A and C. Because Egypt had pretty good land too, right? Is that what you're saying? Okay. So I'll have to change that for the next class. A and C. Roger. So another use of the Post-it is to write down a review question for the next class. I love that, and I will do that for each class. What happened to God's people once they entered the land of Canaan over time? Over time, what happened to the people? Mixed and mingled with the people that were there. Is that good or bad? So you're saying it was bad. So bad stuff. Bad stuff happens, right? Hence the minor prophets. So Karen is going to be my scripture reader again today. But whenever I have a slide that needs to be read, except by me because my voice gets tiring after a while, just jump in and read the slide. Okay? So Karen, go. We're going to find out in the coming weeks that when it comes to adultery, it hits literally at home with who? Hosea. So we're going to find out that he had to deal with this quite a bit in his family. So what do we know about the Canaanites before Israel entered the Promised Land? Years. It's a long time. So who were the Canaanites? The Canaanites were descendants of Canaan, son of Ham, John said, and grandson of Noah. Migrating from the original home, the descendants of Canaan to reach the Persian Gulf and to live there for some time. They then spread west across the mountain chain of Lebanon and to the very edge of the Mediterranean Sea, occupying all the land which later became what? Oh, I don't like what happened there. Somehow that jumped in. That's going to come later, so we'll save that for later. I should have had a map there. All right, what worldwide contribution did the Canaanites provide? Does anybody want to speculate before I show the answers? Okay, well, my research said that they did have an alphabet. So. Yeah. So, what might the development of an alphabet help the Israelites? Which one of these might have been a way to help the Israelites? It greatly loosened the elites' hold on power. All Israelites could become more literate. The ability to write down God's message in ancient times ensured the writing for our warning today. It gave the prophets the means to spread God's word. Which one of those seems about right? They're all correct. Again, Roger. 2 answers. I had 4 answers. That's true. That's true. Superstitions employed by the Canaanites. Someone want to read?
The superstitions of the Canaanites were very much in the sometimes been maintained that the God of the Old Testament was an arbitrary tyrant who drove out the Canaanites and brought Israel into Palestine. And this, it has been said, was a cruel, illogical act.
You've heard that, right? About God.
Such a judgment, however, is unjust and out of accord with the facts. God, in taking his land away from the Canaanites, was doing gracious and merciful things in the remainder of the world.
And whose land was it, really? It's God's land, right? It's his land. The whole world's his.
The Canaanites had themselves become abominations. If there was to be any salvation for the world, Canaan must go. The cup of their evil had filled, and they could no longer be permitted to exist. Let no one then charge God with a lack of justice in his treatment.
Do you agree with that? I agree with that. So, killing me. How those slides got. All right, so I'm going to go back to that one slide because that was the slide that you're supposed to infer, not that map. All right, and this kind of goes back to what John was saying. So, with me. All right, let's get. Okay. Infer something from this. Yep. What else?
There was a religion and a land.
Yep.
So, Canaan was, for many, many hundreds of years, really a vassal of Egypt. So you see that many of the gods and many of the features of the Canaanite gods were actually Egyptian gods. But there's some Egyptian flavor there throughout the reign.
So, does anybody know what god this is? This is Moloch. Okay, and what do we know about Moloch? He had a head of a bull and the body of a man, right? And what did the Canaanites? Well, you can see what the Canaanites were doing. They were sacrificing children, right? And so I have some information on that particular sacrifice in just a few slides. But I want you to notice also there's this going on and this going on. And there's a reason for that. And I'm going to show you this in a few. I'm not sure what happened to that. I apologize how those got mixed up. I hope this doesn't happen with other slides. So we know Canaan's right up here. Okay. Come on. All right, so who was Ahaz? Was he a king of Edom? Was he a king of Israel? Was he a king of Moab? Was he a king of Judah? Does anybody know anything about the kings? Believe me, I didn't know much about the kings as far as all the different kings. He was king of Judah. So there's this. Does this sound familiar? Who wants? Oh, go ahead, Karen. This is a Bible verse. Sorry. So this was a description for most all the kings of Israel, and for quite a few of the kings of Judah. And this is the king of Judah. Anybody want to read that?
The valley of Hinnom is first mentioned in the Bible as part of the border between the tribes of Judah and Benjamin. It meets and merges with the Kidron Valley, the other principal valleys around the Old City and the Pool of Siloam. During the late First Temple period, it was the site of the pulpit where some of the kings of Judah were sacrificed their children by fire. Jeremiah 7:31. He falls fell with Molech, Baal, in the Hinnom Valley.
And basically we're talking about the Hinnom Valley is right here, and you can see where the Temple Mount is, city of David, of course. And the Kidron Valley is over here. And John, you probably even been, I'm not sure if we went to this particular. So we were in the. Okay.
from that same, it's that location where there was constant rubbish or garbage being burned in the Valley of Hinnom. It's also where Judas committed suicide. So there's lots of the
So did that come at, I'm sorry, go ahead, Roger.
While you've got that over again, the field of blood, which valley?
It's in the Hinnom.
In the Hinnom Valley?
That's where Judas committed suicide. He committed suicide in a place where there was it was a place of dumping. It was like a city dump.
Yeah.
And it was constantly
The fire
on
on
fire.
fire.
Right, exactly.
Child sacrifice was primary practice associated with Tophen. Tophen means heath or hearth. Does anybody know what that hearth is, or heath? I guess that's how you pronounce it. Or I've researched it, and it's like a furnace or a fireplace. Parents would hand over their children to be placed on the idol's hands. The hands were heated up. The idol, made of bronze, would then burn the child alive. Or the infant was placed inside the belly of the idol, which was really a furnace. And the priest would then, what would they do? They beat the drum so it drowned out the screams of the infant or the child. And I think that's what the horns were representing too, is the drowning out of the infants. Now, if you remember in that picture of Moloch, there was also a priest, and you had people bowing down to the idol. The practice of child sacrifice seemed to have been adopted by the Judeans during the reign of Asa, and to have become widespread during the reign of Manasseh. Who wants to read this?
The desolate valley of Hinnom, just south of the old city in Jerusalem, is where the ancient Canaanites reported began conducting the sacrifices in which children were burned and committed perished. Guess who ended up doing the exact same? Who ended up doing the same exact thing in Saxon just years later? It's obvious that the Israelites became the evil that God wanted wiped out of his promised land prior to the end. The minor prophets were there for sent to proclaim Israelites' sin and warn them of coming judgment if they would not repent.
So you're talking about the Hinnom Valley. Who was using it before the Israelites showed up on the scene? The Canaanites were doing the sacrificing of the children, and then the Israelites came out on the scene, built the city of Jerusalem, the city of David, right? And then in the same exact spot that the Canaanites were sacrificing children, the Israelites ended up sacrificing the children. Remember, we go back to, was it good or bad that the Israelites did not do what God asked them to do when they came into the land? He told them to do what? And they end up doing the exact same thing. Again, it just shows you some of the locations. Now, I did a little research on the Canaanite deities. John probably knows a lot more about this than I do. Does anybody want to read this?
Baal is the name by which the supreme Canaanite deity is known, who had 3 wives who were also his sisters.
Now, remember we talked about Ham, and what was one of the things that I thought might have influenced the Canaanites based on Ham?
He was cursed. That's what you were getting at. He was cursed by
He was, right?
his father, and so he was maybe marginalized and disenfranchised, but he rejected God, and the act that he performed basically was one that disgusted God to the point that he was cursed.
Right. And why was he cursed?
Looking upon his father's nakedness, which we discussed in our class a long time ago, but yeah, there's some interesting theories as to what that actually was.
So, would that have an influence on the people to follow? Maybe we talked about maybe that might have been the reason that we're talking about sexual immorality, the Canaanites. We have El, who had 3 wives, who were also his sisters. Of course, we're talking about a god here. It's not an actual person, right? but they worshipped these particular gods.
If I may, El was also the name for the true God.
It was.
A generic God. It's like the God with maybe a lower G. So it was kind of a ubiquitous name among names like Daniel and Israel. All these names that end in L, of course, include this name.
Right.
It's like a generic God.
So a generic God, lowercase g. Thomas, you want? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Baal was the son of El, and the reigning king of the gods, also known as the storm god. Baal in the Bible can refer to many different Baals, and Baal Hadad is likely one that received much worship from the Israelites.
Does that make sense? I think it's pronounced a dot, a knot. A knot. Is that how you pronounce that? Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Thomas.
Hadad was Baal's sister, as well as his mom. As a war and love goddess, she is best known for gory acts of violence done to those who oppose her. Hadad is, besides Baal, the most well-known deity in Canaanite mythology.
Baal's sister, as well as his what? A wife. Again, sexual immorality. And then here's a god that you probably have heard throughout the Old Testament. Anybody want to read these? Okay.
Asherah was a fertility goddess and the wife of El, who mothered 70 gods, including Baal, which would also make her a mother goddess. She was a major source of the Israelite unfaithfulness. She was worshipped through the Asherah pole, which may have been designed after trees. God specifically forbade any tree to be grown near his altar, knowing that this was heavily linked with Asherah worship.
I found that interesting that God didn't want any trees in these particular areas because he felt like the Israelites might end up worshiping, in a sense, these trees.
Another form of Asherah worship here and there is the Sumerian goddess Ishtar, ritual prostitution. Both male and female prostitutes were used for sexual worship, though whether or not they were forced is unknown. The practice too was specifically condemned by Mosaic law. The Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight. They forgot about the Lord their God, and they served the image Asherah pole. Judges 3:7.
So how long did it take after God's divided the kingdom for idol worship to appear? Was it 100 years? Was it 10 years? Was it 1 year? Was it 1 day?
When you said after Solomon, after the division of the kingdoms of north and south?
Yep. It was maybe not on day one, but it didn't take very long after day one for them to start idol worship. So 1 Kings 14:21 through 24. Does anybody know who the blank refers to? Blank was the son of Solomon. Go, Karen.
He was 41 years old and became king, who did evil in the eyes of the Lord. They also set up for themselves high places, sacred stones, and Asherah poles on every high hill and under every spreading tree. There were even male shrine prostitutes in the land. The people engaged in all the detestable practices of the nations the Lord had forbidden.
So does this sound familiar?
Yeah, it sounds like his father.
Yeah, his father in his later years, right? But does this look like what the Canaanites were doing as far as their worship? Israelites end up doing the same thing. So Rehoboam was the first king of Judah, right? 1 Kings 12:28 through 30. After seeking advice, the king, does anybody know that Jeroboam, right? Made 2 golden calves. He said to the people, "It is too much for you to go to Jerusalem. Here are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt. One he set up in Bethel, and the other in Dan." Remember that. I got in trouble. And this became a sin The people came to worship the one at Bethel and went as far as Dan to worship the other. Now, we're going to talk about this later when we're talking about some of the minor prophets as far as why they did this. It says why they did it. Jeroboam didn't want them to actually go back to Jerusalem because he didn't want them to want to stay there and not come back to, in that sense, Israel. So he ended up placing these idols in these two locations to keep them going back to Jerusalem. That's basically what it was. So these are the first two kings, Jeroboam for Israel and Rehoboam for Judah, and they started doing bad stuff as soon as they became the king. Anybody want to read?
Canaanite worship utterly immoral. Being a polytheism extremely debased tide, Canaanite worship practice was barbarous and thoroughly licentious. The brutality, lust, and abandon of Canaanite mythology is far worse than elsewhere in the world at the time. And the shocking characteristics of Canaanite deities that had no moral character whatsoever must have brought the worst traits in their followers and inspired many of the most demoralizing practices of the time, such as sacred prostitution, child sacrifice, and snake worship. It was obvious that people should ascend to the moral level of the sordid gods they worship, or rather the gods were reflected in their societies.
Go ahead, Jonathan, read this.
Canaanite worship worthless and corrupt. Such an exhausted, corrupt religion that had no other than a lifeless effect on the population.
Lifeless effect on a population.
So vile had the practices of the Canaanites become that the land was said to vomit out its inhabitants in Leviticus 18:25. The Israelites were warned by Yahweh to keep all his statutes and laws that the land into which he was about to bring them would not vomit them out. Leviticus 20:22.
So was it wrong for God to want to wipe out the Canaanites before the Israelites came into the land? And whose land was it? It's God's land. Did it seem kind of cruel to want to wipe out these particular people before the Israelites came in? Lifeless effect on the population? Doesn't sound too encouraging.
I think it's easy for us to understand that than people in the world. I mean, this is the idea that God is some tyrant that, literally, basically was someone who committed this heinous crime of wiping out peoples. It's very popular in secular thought and colleges and those types of things. But obviously, what God wanted to keep holy, he wanted to keep them the consequences of sin, and this is a great way of doing that. But more than that, we forget about people of Gideon, we forget about Rahab, we forget about this mercy that he displays during this course of events. And then, secondly, there were situations where God tells him to wipe out peoples, but he did not eradicate or commit genocide. I mean, that's
Well, you said 400 years. He gave the Canaanites 400 years. We haven't been a nation for, 230-some years or something like that? 400 years. And I'm sure that God gave them opportunities like he gives us opportunities today to do what's right. 400 years. So it wasn't like he gave them a week and then, took them out. 400 years is a long time.
I believe he sent prophets too.
It's
We don't have some of it recorded, but I think there's very good evidence that one of the interesting names that pops up that is Balaam. Balaam was a prophet
Right.
who was familiar with Yahweh and that understood who Yahweh was, and we don't know who taught him or what
right,
group of prophets he was from.
right.
So I think that there were prophets. I think that there were opportunities they had that we just don't know.
Well, he sent prophets to other nations. We have a record. We're going to talk about a couple of nations that he sent prophets to. So it wasn't like that was something he never did. All right, this just shows you some of the different gods and goddesses. You may know who this particular person might be. What king was the first to cut down an Asherah pole? Before Josiah, there was someone else. Actually, I think he might have been second, third king. Might have been. Starts with an A, ends with an A. King Asa cut down his grandmother's obscene Asherah pole and burned it in the Kinra Valley, and that's 1 Kings 15, 12, and 13. So King Asa was the first. I can't remember, was he the second or third king? Actually, in the next class, I'm going to have a list of the kings, and you're going to let me know if they were good or bad. So we're going to get familiar with the kings in some of the classes. What other king was known to cut down an Asherah pole? And this is what Brother John had mentioned. It was King Josiah. He was a pretty good king, right? Yeah, he was a great king. What were the Israelites to do with the nations and the land God was giving them? I think my wife mentioned this earlier. What were they to do with all the nations? The book of Deuteronomy, a summary of the law of Moses, gives us specific commands on which the Israelites were to do with the 7 pagan nations surrounding them. Chapter 7, verses 1 through 3 states, in no uncertain terms, when the Lord your God brings you into the land you are entering to possess and drive out before you all those different peoples, 7 nations larger and stronger than you, and when the Lord God has delivered them over to you and you have defeated them, you must what? How? Totally make no treaty with them and show them no mercy. This is the 7 nations. Right. Must destroy them totally, show them no mercy. And that would be all the different nations that were in this particular land. It was frankly a question of destroying or being destroyed, by keeping separate or being and consumed, which they end up being. What nation was not listed in Deuteronomy 7, 1 through 3? See if you were paying attention. Is it? Which one of those? It is A. Roger. Just A. Just A. All right. I don't know what's going on with my slides today. That is true. Now, personally, I believe today the Canaanites are basically our godless society. Oh, there was a slide before this. Oh, and we are the Israelites entering the promised land. Today we can either obey Christ's gospel of salvation or be destroyed like the nations that went their own way. And so I was going to have you guys tell me what might represent the altar of Moloch today, or what might represent worshiping the high places, or even a shrine prostitute America today. How do people consult a wooden idol today? Anybody want to give any today examples of any of this? That's a good point. When they were bowing down to these different idols, were they concerned about the God itself helping all people? What were they mainly concerned about when they were worshiping these particular gods? Themselves. They were worshiping Moloch and sacrificing their child because they thought Moloch would give them something in return. It was all about them. It had nothing to do with honoring God, our God, or honoring the community or honoring the nation. It was all about honoring them. Selfishness. Do we see that today when it comes to all the different things that's going on today? Yes. Karen.
About the evil altar of Moloch. I mean, people in today's society are more or less getting their children over to not, atheism, because that's more or less, sacrificing their children to Moloch because, they themselves are too busy with living for themselves instead of, so they're actually, they're not, yeah, literally, but eventually they will be fired for eternity.
Now, I pay attention to politics way too much. Does anybody know what happened in Wisconsin last night? It was it a conservative judge? Very liberal. And if you don't know anything about the Supreme Court in Wisconsin, it had been dominated by conservatives, but now it's going to be dominated by liberals. So now the liberal judge that ran for that position, what did she run on? Abortion rights. Because in Wisconsin, I think they have stricter abortion rights than other states. So now this particular judge is going to open it up to abortion on demand. And not just, after, no abortion's good. But in some of these states, you have abortion up to what? Weeks before they're even up to the last day. Is that an example of offering to Moloch? It's the same thing, isn't it? And that's our society today. We think that the Canaanites were some barbaric, just not very with it nation, but that's what's going on today. Worship in the high places in 2023. We have people that are worshiping certain things in our society. We have the religion of climate change, where people are basically, that's their whole life is just climate change and whatever that means. And we have all these idols, and I know that Kyle was talking about this Sunday, the idol worship today. We talk about idol worship in the Old Testament, but he outlined that there's idol worship in the New Testament and, of course, today as well. So this should have been first. I'm not sure how this got all situated. So anyway, I apologize for that. Who are our minor prophets in 2023? We are, right? The ones in this room right here, the one in this building. Aren't we the minor prophets today? Priests, prophets. You're exactly right, Roger. All right, did the priest kings have anything to do with the Israelites turning from God? Yes or no? 100% yes. Yeah, the priesthood of Israelites. In Israel's history, the priests and false prophets often became corrupt and turned away from God, leading the people in the worship of idols. Aaron?
Jeremiah 5:31. Prophets prophesy falsely, and the priests rule on their own authority, and my people love it so. But what will you do at the end of it? For leaders pronounce judgment for a bribe, for priests instruct for a price, and the prophets divine for money. Yet they lean on the Lord, saying, is not the Lord in our midst? Calamity will not come upon us.
Therefore, prophets arose when the priests failed to teach God's law to the people. Kings and judges failed to govern the country justly. In a sense, God called and spoke through prophets as whistleblowers when the Israelites were on the brink of self-destruction, which was quite often, right? Under which king did idol worship first come into effect with God's people? Anybody want to speculate before I give the answers? Who was the first king to introduce idol worship? Well, David, now we know it, Rehoboam, right? We just mentioned that a while ago. There's Solomon. It was Solomon. Roger, only one answer here. Good job. It is Solomon. 1 Kings. I'm confused with Solomon. I've always been confused with Solomon. He's supposed to be what? The wisest man ever to live. Probably in that time and probably today. How many wives did he have? He had, was it 700? All, yeah, Egypt and the Ammonites and the Moabites. There you go. Of course, that was tradition in those days was to marry someone from another country, and that was kind of a, I guess, a treaty kind of sense. All right, that's where he worshipped some of the different gods. What Canaanite god did Solomon worship? I'm just going to go ahead and give the answer here, or unless you guys want to speculate. It was D. Another evil in forsaking Yahweh came in forsaking God's structure for living in the community as a district and holy people of God. Concern for the poor, the widow, the orphan, and the stranger in the land was replaced by oppression. We're going to study one of the minor prophets that this was his main topic, was the concern for the poor and how social injustice for the poor. Business practices overturned God's standard that extortion, taking bribes, dishonest gain became commonplace. So we're not talking about just idol worship, sexual immorality. We're talking about all these things too as far as why the minor prophets came into being. Leaders use power to destroy lives, and religious leaders despise God's holy things. Far from enriching the nation, these ungodly practices led to the downfall of the nation or nations when it came to the divided nation, right? The prophets were often the last voices in the land calling people back to God and to just and healthy community. Before God placed judgment on his people, he gave them prophets to warn them with lots of time to listen and turn. John said that the Canaanites had 400 years. Northern kingdom didn't have that many years, but they did have, does anybody want to speculate a number of years, the northern kingdom? 210 years, about as long as our country's been in existence. So the northern kingdom didn't have as much time as the southern kingdom. They still had plenty of time. Southern kingdom of Judah had 345. So a long time, again, a long time to do what was right. So why are the minor prophets called minor prophets? This is one of the questions. Oh, by the way, sending you guys emails, is that the best thing to do? I know that me and Mickey are the only ones probably read our emails. I don't have an iPhone, so sending emails is what I do. So in the future, you may want to check your emails before a class because I might have some questions for you. So is that the last bell? Oh, no. Let's answer this first. It's shorter in length. It had nothing to do with anything other than it wasn't because they weren't important or they weren't inspired or they weren't as clear. They were shorter in scale. Okay? All right, so here's the deal. Here's the deal. I still have a few slides for the introduction, but I can go on and move into the first prophet, which my wife's going, yes, we need to move on to Obadiah. So I may have just a few slides that I didn't talk about tonight, but we'll get into Obadiah on Sunday. Send you an email. Oh, okay, I can do that. All right. Make sure you get your postie and put it in one of those back chairs. Again, This is helpful for me, but also could be a review question that you may want to have us go over on Sunday. All right, thank you very much. You may leave.